Good afternoon, friends. David Wright here, and I am your host of the Disruptive Innovators Champions of Digital Business podcast. And today I am lucky enough to be joined by Duleep Wikramanayake. Duleep, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be on here.
Yeah, a long time in the making. Duleep, for any of our listeners who may not be familiar, can you just tell everyone a little bit about your current role?
Yeah. So today I'm the VP of Information Technology at SimonMed. I've been there for about 5 years. I came out of retirement to help SimonMed as the Chief Information Officer in 2019 and gracefully stepped down when Lee Milligan came over, take it over. And then he asked me to stay back as VP of IT and take over the infrastructure and all the data center apparatus that we have today to manage our imaging business, which is pretty large, to say
Yeah,
the
of
least. Yeah.
course. And I know you guys are doing some really cool stuff. So I'm excited to hear more about what you guys are up to at SimonMed. But before anything, we like to start the episode with just one piece of actionable advice you might look to leave the listeners with today.
So, I adopted a while ago a sense of do no harm in your actions. And, we have a tendency to say things with unintended consequences, right? So be aware of what you're saying. So, every time you say something or do something, it usually has an adverse effect or a positive effect. Sometimes it can be a positive effect for somebody and a negative effect for something. So I have to always look at that and see, okay, what is that karmic good or bad that's going to come out of what you do and what you say, right? So, and sometimes we say a lot of things that can affect one another. So, and going back to somebody like Don Miguel Ruiz, I think the first, what is the thing, right? That says, keep your word, impeccable. I try as hard as possible because given the way I grew up, being impeccable is kind of a hard thing to do. But your actions at the end of the day, really what means things, right? So when you're doing your actions, make sure whatever you do, think through it, make sure that you do no harm, intentionally or unintentionally. I think that's what I live by today.
Love that. Great advice. And, love the shout out to the 4 agreements, which I know we've talked about offline. And what it makes me think about too, and I want to kind of get into a little bit about your backstory, Delete. But before we do, just is how significant it was for me too to develop a pause button, right? Because I'm not responsible for my first thought. I'm gonna have a thought or a
Yep.
feeling that pops into my head that I can't control. It's
Yep.
like it's human nature, but it's what I do with that thought or feeling. Am I going to act on it? When I was younger, the space between having that thought or feeling and acting was much shorter.
Very short.
I especially like in business, I'd have something happen, and I would go into fight or flight, like Mr. Fix It mode, like, oh my God, what do we got to do? Like,
Yeah.
we gotta, and I've come to find, obviously in IT in particular, right? Like a sense of urgency is required on a number of different levels a lot of the time, of course, right? Especially when we're troubleshooting or in security incident. I mean, there's plenty of times, but at the same time, there's a lot of times where, particularly from a strategy standpoint, where it's actually going to behoove me to take a step back and, really meditate on it, talk with my trusted peers on it
Yep.
prior to making an action. And it took a lot
Yep.
of doing it another type of way to figure that out. But so,
I was fortunate enough to go through some training for that. So I
there you go.
I doubt without that training I would have got there. So I'm very blessed in more ways than one.
Well,
One of those
Philippe,
things.
let's talk about your career, your life, personally, professionally, kind of where did you start out and how did you get to the point in your career that you're at today?
Yeah, I grew up in Sri Lanka, pretty poor
Mm.
with my grandma. So that's going all the way back to 1957. I think we kind of joke about it, saying, "Hey, those are really good years." And there was a lot of innocence in that period, right? Um, but growing up with my grandmother gave me a really good basis for morals and 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 to kind of get it done no matter what, right? So one of the key things that she used to always tell me was, do not compromise your standards because somebody next to you is compromising their standards. You still keep that, right? Make sure you're gonna do your best that you can do for that day or for that moment. So that's one of those things. And I was very lucky or blessed. Again, I think I've been blessed all my life. Even though I grew dirt poor, somehow my forefathers always went to this prestigious high school, which we call St. Thomas's College. It's about probably 180 years old, and it's one of the oldest institutions within East Asia, right? And my grandmother actually went and bullied the dean, and they call it the warden there, to make sure, even though I failed the entrance exam, to get me in there. So that's where my life began. So being in that school, you go from kindergarten all the way grade 12. And in my, I guess, school career, right? As I got older, I was a cricketer, and one of the things I realized was that even then, your the stature of your wealth or who you are, who your parents are, makes a big difference on whether you make it to a team or not. No matter how skilled you are. So at some point, I said to myself, you know what, this is absurd. If I get into an individual skill, the chances are that I'll probably be able to, compete. And there's no politics in that, right? So I got into swimming, and at first I was horrible at it. And I remember coming last in the first heat, right? And you're like, okay, now all you're doing is watching your friends, swimming and making it to the next level and the next level. So one day a funny thing happened. My coach, I love him to death even today. Um, he said, "Hey, all of you are going to do this 2 mile sea swim." And I go, "Hey, coach, I'm a sprinter, right? I don't need to do this, right?" And he said, "No, the entire team is going to go." And I was so scared of the sea at that time. And I'm like, "There's no way in hell I'm going to swim in the sea." He goes, "Well, either you sink or swim, Duleep." I mean, literally. So I decided to train. And I thought to myself, let me swim as fast as I can for how long as I can. And I started doing that. And every day I would get into the pool and, like a madman, just swim as fast as I can, as far as I can. And in the end, I didn't realize I was really that amazingly good overnight. And so when I went for this sea swim, I didn't realize I was trailing in third place with 256 other swimmers. And I thought I took the right turn. I took the wrong turn, but I still came in 8th out of 256. And my coach goes, "We couldn't find you. We were worried." And I said, "Well, I was leading. I was looking for my guideboard because my guideboard was always behind it." So I beat everybody in my school that day. And, I was 8th nationally in the 2 mile sea swim. And something dawned on me at that point. I said, "Oh my God, it just takes effort to get better." That's it. It takes effort. So make a long story short, I excelled in swimming. I represented Sri Lanka in swimming. I represented Sri Lanka in diving. And I represented Sri Lanka in water polo. And on top of that, I did 5 other sports for my high school: um, soccer, field hockey, rugby, track, and volleyball. And all of a sudden, I got into these team sports because suddenly I became somewhat of a celebrity and a good athlete. And then, you were kind of sought out. It's the weirdest thing. I think, we see that here today when it work, right? Once you get good at something, you get opportunities outside your lane that you're in, right? And so And then I work for a nonprofit organization called Save the Children Federation. I got a scholarship to go to the Air Force to be a pilot, and I somehow decided that I needed to be in some kind of career for the simple reason that the Air Force bonded you for 22 years, which means you couldn't get out. So by the time I got out, I would have been 41, and I think it would have been good for me because I kind of grew up very militaristically with my grandmother. She was like, there was there was no, gray area. It was black or white, right? So you just march to her beat. And so I got into accounting, and as I got into accounting, I got really good at it. And my godfather, who was the managing director of that company, and I was just an intern, he said, "Duleep, you're really good at what you're doing. So you know what? I'm going to put you into all my personal clients." And I thought to myself, "Oh, great! I get to work with the big accounts." Lo and behold, it was all a nonprofit, all the charity organizations that we had. I had to start doing the fund accounting, and I go to myself, "Oh my God, what the hell did I get into? Because how is this going to get me into a career?" Right? And my aunt, who was the director of Save the Children, said, "Hey, can you help me, do the books? I just got this job." And so I would go there for lunch, and in return I would, do her books every day. And as Save the Children kind of its tentacles grew in Sri Lanka and it got bigger, I trained one account and I trained the second account, and then they left. And the second guy who left and said, "Hey, Marina, why do you want to hire somebody else? Duleep is the one who's been doing your books from day one. So why don't you just hire him?" So that was a bit of luck. I get recommended, and then she said, "Oh, you know what? I'll hire him." Perfect. So here I'm, at Save the Children doing all the fund accounting. And I came up with a yardstick to measure self-help, because that's what they were doing. They would get donations from folks here and the USAID, and then they would funnel that money in there, and they would train the shanties or very low depressed areas with absolutely no housing to build their own houses. So they became masons, carpenters, nurses, plumbers, and kind of taught them how to do that. So my job, other than the accounting, was also, they said, "Duleep, we need to figure out what that self-help quotient is. Okay, we put this much money in. What was that payback?" So we ended up getting a payback uh, calculator that I calculated, saying, okay, based on the number of people we trained and how they got jobs, this is the self-help that came in, and they loved it. So this was metrics in 1978, right? I don't think it was called metrics. I mean, we would sit down and have this, what they call the green and white paper, and there was no Excel, there was no Lotus 1, 2, 3. This is all sit down and type, and it would get folded multiple times, and then packaged and sent back to the US. So because of that, I got offered an internship in the US in 1982. And so I was like thrilled. It's like I never thought I would ever make it to the US. So that internship got me here, and I had $300 borrowed dollars and a suitcase when I came out here. And my first pay, like my annual pay as an intern, was $9,600 a year. It was less than minimum wage, but they gave you housing. Uh, it was a messy housing. I mean, there was this whole bunch of apartments that they were trying to renovate. And in one place, the kitchen worked, in another place, the bedroom worked, and in another place, the bathroom worked. So I kind of used that whole complex to live in there, but it was free. And I'm like, hey, this is better than when I was in Sri Lanka, which by the way, I forgot to tell you, I was homeless at 18 and I was homeless at 21. So so having a roof over your head, and it didn't matter which complex I had to go to take a shower, which complex I had to go cook, and which complex I had to sleep in. I was happy as a clam. I'm like, this is great. This is an upgrade, right? At all levels. So I started going to, Noah Community College, and I figured it's like, hey, I'm a high school dropout. I never finished high school. I was in grade 11 twice, grade 12 twice. I was overage for sports. And, and the warden said, "I think you're wasting your time in school." And suddenly, I was outside of the dorm, And my grandmother, who was sick, was living with my aunt, and they didn't have any space for me. And guess what? Well, suddenly, I had to fend for myself and find a place to live. So being here, coming here, even though I didn't have a network of friends, it was amazing how people adopted me. I mean, at all levels, work. I had what I call my Jewish moms. It was awesome. That actually brought me clothing and pots and pans and you name it. And they're like, don't you go buy anything. We'll get you all this stuff. Right. It's like, and then, you know, what's your shirt size? It's like, and oh, perfect. They're just exact same size as my husband. Let me get some jackets he never wears. And, so they brought me winter coats and stuff like that. So to this day, I'm so grateful to them because, you know, without any of that help that I got, I would have never made it. So from there onwards, I think they came up with a PC for the department for the first time, and I was fascinated by it. And so we were completely mainframe at that time, and I had started dibble dabbling with computers. And Larry Correa, who used to be the director of IT, was American Indian native, and he would give me access, and didn't realize how much access he gave me. And he would always threaten to cut my fingers off. He said, "How the hell do you get this much access?" I said, "You gave it to me." So I didn't realize I had that aptitude to kind of figure things out very quickly. And eventually, we got a PC, and I started learning a lot about that PC, and then fast forward, that was 1984, right? So almost 40 years later, I became a pretty technical, hands-on person for a long, long time in IT. Got into the newspaper business, completely automated a newspaper on a Windows environment, right? When Mac was king. Then got into healthcare industry through sheer fluke. Got into Oxford Healthcare, which is now United Health. And then followed the CIO to Columbia House, where I really learned all the high-end computing data centers, because we were the second largest website in 2001 next to eBay. Even Amazon was small because we were like 200 million in revenue for a website at that time, right? And I remember telling these guys, hey, you know what? We should be able to beat Apple because we have all the digital media. We should really put something out there. And they're like, no, that's never going to work. And they didn't want to do it, right? And look, Spotify and Pandora and all those people came and just shat on everybody, literally.
Yep. They're ahead of your time.
I always feel that when I think I don't have the right methodology. I still don't have the right methodology to convince people that, hey, I see something you don't see.
Man. Sometimes I'll ask people, and I'm going to ask you actually at the end of the episode, what advice would you give your younger self? And some people joke like, "Oh, buy Apple," back in 2000, right? Or
Yeah.
oh man. But on a more serious note, so Duleep, what would you say? I mean, ton of just a great story of and I love what you had said in the beginning too about basically I'm trying to remember the book right now, but one of the classics about how like with athletes, the difference between like fantastic athletes and very average athletes is typically practice, right? They
Yep.
just like practice so rigorously and they
Yep.
get better, right? It's just, and it seems simple, right? But a lot of people are just not willing to take the time to get really good at something. So I just think it was so good to hear like the time that you dedicated to, swimming and, but what would you say is one of the most important things that you learned over the course of your journey personally and professionally? And what was life like before learning it and after learning it?
So, it's the truth. The truth is in front of you. And Just like the scriptures would say, it shall set you free, right? We see the truth, we don't like it, and we'll make up something around it. And then we are completely unhappy because the truth doesn't change. Your story changed. And in that, you react so differently to the truth instead of just accepting the truth for whatever it is, right? It's good or bad. It's beyond your control of what you see, whether it's what somebody says or what somebody's done or what happens in the world. It's just the truth. There's, you know, you're looking, you're looking at it, you're seeing it, and then you react to it very, very differently. So I've learned to accept the truth as is. So whether it's a friend that lets you down, or and your kids not, doing what you think they should be doing, right? And then what you do is you learn to let go, right? It's one of those things where you manage your expectations to a point where try to live with zero expectations. It's very hard to do, but the more you do it, the more enlightening it becomes. So I think it's the truth. The truth is in front of you and it shall set you free, right? Just accept it.
Yep. I love that.
Yeah, you might not like it. I don't like it most of the time, right? I just don't like it. I would love to change it, or I would like to change the story around it. You can't, it is what it is. And in that, my dad used to give me he told me something when I was very young, and he said, "You'll figure it out." And he goes, "Duleep, always hide in the open." I go, "What does that mean?" And, he said, "You'll figure it out." And he never told me. And I finally figured it out, I think very late in life. It's like, if you don't have any secrets, if you are very transparent and you just, nobody has anything on you. In other words, if you hide in the open, nobody sees, you know. So you do something wrong, you just own up to it. Don't try to hide it. Just own up to it, feel the consequences, and you know what? You're absolutely free at that point. Because how much more can they punish you? They can't punish you more than once. I mean, they can, but most people forget it and they go, "Oh, okay, at least is open and honest. We don't have to investigate as to what happened."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. My friends and I all talk about how, acceptance is the answer to all my problems today.
Yeah.
That nothing is ever out of place. It's always, in my perception of things. And, for me, and I was talking about this the other night, like it was only after that it was only after being okay, um, losing everything or not gaining what I thought I had lost back, that I was truly free to like move forward in a different way. Because if I don't, like, in that moment where I was at a pivotal moment in my life where it felt like kind of, I don't want to say all was lost, that sounds dramatic, but like where I had lost something that was important to me and I wasn't sure if I was going to get it back, that um I was able to be okay with me and like be grateful for just my existence. And you know uh in getting to that place, it totally reframed, the way that I approach life and business for that matter. It's pretty crazy. So um I would ask Dilip, is there, that was kind of one of those pivotal moments for me. Is there a time in your life that either, you failed at a project, or you had a moment of, difficulty, but you ultimately took a, profound lesson away from that moment?
Yeah. I think, one of my struggles was my temper, so that's when I had to go get help in 2009 and find how do I do this? Why am I losing it? And so I was very fortunate to work with a, person who was one of Albert Ellis's proteges, Albert Ellis wrote the book, Guide to Rational Living. So he was the founder of Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy. So as I went through that, as he evaluated me, he had two clients in his lifetime that had a paradigm shift. I was one of them. And he said to me one day, I said, I just wanted to have this clear in your head that the entire world around will see your change, and they will really admire you for that. The one thing that you're going to struggle is you will not be able to have a bad day at home because your family is not going to be convinced you changed. Every single time you have a bad day, they think the next shoe is going to drop. So this is 2009. Fast forward to 2014 or 13, probably 14. It was one of those things where suddenly nothing I did well with my wife or my two kids. So there was nothing I could do or say that did not offend them, whether it was at 1 watt per channel or 100 watts per channel. Didn't matter. So I really decided, okay, at that point I was struggling, and I had reached out back to my coach, and he goes, Duleep, well, you'll have to figure something out, and just, I warned you, this is that's going to happen. And this is where I said, this is the part that might not work for you at the end of the day. So have acceptance that it might not work for you. So I'm like, at this crossroads going, gee, what do I do now? Luckily, one of my good friends recommended Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now. Right. And in that, I think there was a chapter on living life without expectations. And I thought to myself, wow, okay. So here I am, have this beautiful house. So here's the example of this beautiful house. And my kids just come in, they're soccer players, put their stinky bags and everything like that all over the place. And I'm like, okay, so my whole thing was, Duleep, you can ask them to take it, put it away, or you can put it away. If I ask them to put it away, it's going to create adversity and it's going to end up in a bad place. If I try to do it myself, it's still going to end up in a bad place. Why are you doing this? Because, they don't want anything. So I thought to myself, okay, so the best way to accept it is let it be there. I will forego having a nice house until whenever that, well, at some point, these kids are going to grow up and go. And maybe at that point, I can have a nice house, right? So this went on for a long, long time, to about 3 weeks. My wife comes and she's really agitated, and she goes, you do nothing because the kids are just throwing stuff away and everything like that. And I looked at her and I said, listen, I can't ask them to do it. If I do, it's going to go to a bad place, so I'm not going to do it. I can take it up there and put it away. And, if I do it, it's still going to go to a bad place. And, my good deed now goes punished. I said, you can take it up there as yourself, right? Or just leave it like that as is, like I'm doing, and I'm okay with it. I remember the shocked look on my wife's face going, what happened to this guy? And then she said, you're becoming very robotic. And I'm like, no, I said, I am living life without expectation. I have no expectations of this stinky bag with sweaty clothes ever leaving the living room. And it doesn't matter if somebody I know comes to my house to visit and it's going to be there. And that's okay with me. I'm not going to be embarrassed. I'm not going to be apologetic. It's my house. That's the way people live here. I can't tell them what to do, the right thing to do. So I am not going to engage and be in a situation where there's adversity. Right? I'm just going to sit down and enjoy it. And actually things started changing. It absolutely started changing because they could not find an excuse to engage me to have a fight for the sake of having a fight right there. I remember the dog was going nuts barking outside and I could hear it. And I'm like, yeah, the dog's barking. My son comes down. Go, Dad, the dog is barking. I'm trying to sleep. I go, yeah, that's what dogs do. They bark. And, the neighbors are going to be mad. I said, if the neighbors are mad, they'll probably come and tell me, and then maybe I'll bring them in at that point. Until they complain, I know I'm okay. I'm assuming that they're okay with it because he's been barking for a while. And if it's bothering you, I said, I would go down, bring the dogs in, and go back to sleep. He just looked at me, didn't know what to say, shook his head and left, right? And the dogs kept barking. And I wasn't going to, bring the dogs in. And I think those things kind of taught to me, and it was like, I felt so much more in control of myself, right? Because I'm like, okay, I have no expectations. The dogs are going to bark. What am I going to do? Stop the dogs barking? And honestly, it wasn't bothering me. If it bothered me, I would have brought them in. But it wasn't bothering me. It's like, I'm like, yeah, you know what? They're having a good time. They're barking at the leaves. They're barking at, whatever they see. They're barking at shadows. And it really started changing the landscape and the relationships between my wife, my kids, and it took time, and it took, so that was 2014. So now it's taken good 8 to 10 years of, slowly building that up, where now they've kind of slowly accepted who I am, my change, all of the above, right? Because I think when my daughter came to me one time and said, Dad, you've never apologized for what happened, for all the yelling and screaming. I said, no, that's not true. I said, I've apologized more than once. And I have actually even written you letters. Well, what does that mean? And I said, listen, you're going to resent me for the rest of your life. I have no control over it. But I said, I'm done apologizing. I don't need to do this anymore. So if this is your choice you make to resent me, and that's fine. I accept the fact that, you're not going to like me or love me. And I said, honestly, I have no qualms about it. I said, here's my puppy. And I showed my dog. And I said, I love this dog more than I love you right now, because with resentment, it is very hard to love somebody who resents you, no matter how much you try, because it's a lost cause. I know how face fell, hit the floor. And ever since then, it's like a huge change in the attitude, right? Because they're realizing it's like, you know what, you can't hold on to things. You want a certain amount of revenge. And I said, you're not going to get it. You're the only one who's going to hurt by it.
What are they saying? Resentment's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. And it's so much truth to that. So these are the trainings that I got, that even today, you will get that initial resentment about when somebody does something wrong, and you, like, in your awareness training, you go, okay, you know what? That's not going to help me. It is what it is. And it is what it is. It's a statement that is really overused, but nobody really thinks about what it is means.
Right.
We use it a lot,
and
right?
It's funny, I really appreciate you sharing this, fairly like personal story, because in my experience, the, growth that I've experienced, emotionally, spiritually, and otherwise, has led to my greatest successes in business. And that's not the reason that I did it. Right.
Yeah.
But it's, for example, today, I'm very unattached to who we work with, when we work with them, if we're going to work with them. I used to be such a prisoner to like, is this going to happen or not? Like,
Yeah.
is this going to and
Yeah.
the more that I let go and was just in acceptance about, we're going to win some, we're going to lose some, and all that I can do is show up and as the best version of myself every day, and leave it all out there, continue to try to learn, grow,
Correct.
and that's it. And then the rest is out of my control. That's really what it comes down to, right? Is there's so much that is out of my control, and trying to control that's what used to drive me crazy.
Yeah.
Is if
Yeah.
I thought I had any semblance of influence over that,
Correct. So in my training, I think one of the things that Richard Pecoroni, what he gave me the insight was, he said, Duleep, you're one of those people who do your best every single time, no matter what it is that you take on, whether it's cooking or whether it's carpentry or doesn't matter, whatever it is, right? Whether it's athletics. So you then force that standard on everybody else. Then you expect that standard, and then you have to drop those expectations because you can't expect somebody to be as good as you, so you'll get along with people who are better than you, but you're not going to you're going to have a tough time with people who don't keep your standard. And it just dawned on me and like, oh my God, it's so true. I mean, that's what I was trying to do with my kids, with my family. I mean, with my coworkers, everything, right? So now I'm like, okay, sometimes at work, you have to have expectations or you have to have those hard conversations, but at the same time, you go, okay, this is all they can do. If they have the potential, teach them with no expectations.
Right. 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 That's all you can do, like you said.
Yeah.
So Duleep, let's talk a little bit about, your current role. So you're at, SimonMed, VP of IT. Talk to us a little bit about, SimonMed's vision or your vision for IT and technology as it's derived from, what SimonMed is up to and maybe some of the key initiatives you guys are working on right now. I know I've been reading about some of the advancements that SimonMed has made in the imaging industry. So, interested to share more with, our listeners, what you guys are up to.
Yeah. So our CEO is very brilliant, right? I mean, in the radiology aspects, Dr. Simon is an amazing mind. He's 10 steps ahead of people in how he thinks. So it's really kind of great to work with him as long as you understand where he's going. So from a clinical standpoint, he's done a lot to enhance the patient care that he does, right? So whether it's an MRI read or a memo read or whatever it is, he's trying to make sure that we do the proper diagnosis or we interpret what we are seeing in that image. So he's put a lot of AI applications towards it to enhance it, right? So to make that read better. My job, on the other hand, that I feel my vision is to try and automate all these things. And then that's where the biggest challenge is, because most of the radiology groups that I work with over 20 years do not pay attention to data governance. And as they don't do that, it becomes very costly at the end of the day when an exam that you scan a person just might not get paid because we don't have the right data. And in that, if you engage in RPA with some AI for data governance, your data before it goes to billing is going to be far more accurate and more susceptible to getting paid than not getting paid, right? And so there's a lot of places in the organization where automation will make sense, whether it's call center. We still tend to do things manually, or we are trying to automate manual things instead of saying, hey, what can the technology do to enhance what you're doing today, right? So don't try to take and say, okay, I'm going to take this data entry and automate that. Well, that's kind of easy to do. I think that was done probably 10, 15 years ago. But how do you enhance it, right? There's AI, to kind of give, hey, here's a better way of doing it. Hey, did you check this? So there are a lot of things within call center that you're very familiar with, in terms of data entry and data governance and how data flows, makes a lot of sense. And then we also don't do what I call modality cost accounting, and it's really important because you can see in a site what modality is really making money and what modality is not making money, and there'll be a good reason why it's not making money. Maybe it's going down too often, or none of the referring doctors want any scans on that modality because it's maybe too old. So that
Right.
might be right. So those are
Right.
the kind of
Or
things.
that region just doesn't happen to have that many modalities for whatever reason.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's super interesting. What What about some of the biggest challenges you guys are facing as an organization today?
I think most of the organization, I don't think is on the same page. At least that's my opinion. People are not looking at the vision that's coming from the top and saying, okay, how do we complement that vision? Because I think everybody, including myself, has ideas about how to do something better. But at the end of the day, you got to follow the company's vision and make that your priority. And even amongst my colleagues, or my teammates, I honestly uh, don't see that. There's a lot of posturing, right? So they want to do something, which is not a bad thing, which is a good thing, but they need to be able to know how to bring that into play. And so instead of bringing what they want to be in play, they will either not make something work properly, and so that becomes problematic for the entire company at the end of the day. So I watch this from afar and go, okay, I have a different attitude of like I would give my boss Lee, hey, let me give you my 30-second argument, because there is more than one way to do something. And I would come and say, hey, this is a better way to do it. And that's a 30-second argument. And after that, I will make sure his way is successful. Now, if everybody doesn't look at it that way, you're not going to be successful. You're going to end up failing it because it wasn't your way. That's missing. That's missing, in my opinion. And I think I'm successful because I would make something work no matter what. Okay, I know I don't agree with this part of the thing, but I will at least try to make it. I'm going to give it my 110% to make that work.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, and I see this a lot. And I was just talking about someone on the podcast the other day about how like you voice your opinion, like you say, it's important to speak up, right? It's
Yep.
important for me to have I like the term like 30-second argument. I think
Yeah.
that's very cool because and I tell this to my clients, like, listen, I'm going to come to you. Don't expect me to just be like your order taker. Like I'm here
Yep.
to be an advisor for you. So I'm going to tell it like it is. Now you might tell me, David, we can't do that. And here's why. And maybe I didn't even think of that because I didn't
Yep.
know
Yep.
for whatever reason.
Yep.
And then I don't have to live with that like resentment of, oh, they're not doing it my way. Right.
Yep.
And I just learned something new because
Yep.
I didn't know what I didn't know. Or they go with that way that whoever the leader is wanted to go with, it fails. And then I'm able to pick up the pieces and we do it the way that I wanted to do it,
Yeah. Yeah. And because we had a couple of successes in those 30-second arguments. So every time I gave Lee an argument, 30-second argument, he goes, ah, shoot, I have to listen to you now because you might make a lot of sense, right? So I'm like, it's okay. If there's more, I said, there's more than one way to do it. I'm just saying, from my view, this might be easier, faster, better. Either way, we're still going to get to the end goal. So it doesn't matter. I
Yep.
just want to give you my 30-second argument,
Well, as a leader, right, and as an entrepreneur, and I like learned this from my mom. Like I have to be striving to try to hire people that are smarter than me,
Absolutely.
and I'm hiring those people so that they can give me, insights and feedback that I don't know
Yep.
about
Yep.
for whatever reason, right? Like you said, like I need to be responsible for that vision and then setting a level of context. And then I want to try to bring people into the picture who can step up and like work within that context, but give them the freedom to voice, exactly what
Yep.
you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great lesson for leaders out there who are listening. Cause I do see that a lot, what you're describing.
Yeah. Just because it's not your way doesn't mean you can't get to that end goal, right? And in the end, it might be that the way that was suggested rather than your idea, you'll end up finding out that was even better, and you go, "Oh, I learned from that." Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, one has to have an open mind, right? I mean, the thing is, at the end of the day, even as a leader, has a leader, right? And my ask on all these leaders is to actually follow your leader and respect your leader and make sure your leader is successful, right? At the end of the day, if you make your leader successful, you're going to be successful because your failure is also his failure. And you don't want to put him in that position, right? Because you're not going to go too far. And I think my success has always been like, okay, how do I make somebody look better? And in some cases, the leaders have kind of ignored that and taken all to themselves. But I've been fortunate to work with a lot of leaders that embrace that and then kind of bring you into that foray when they're celebrating. So, and for every once in a while that you lose, it's okay. You can lose sight of the fact that, it's still a good way, because at the end of the day, loyalty is something that is disappearing today, right? I mean, it's not there anymore.
And I kind of, what you said about, a leader, bringing you in or not, right? Depending on who it is and where they're at, like whether they can be acknowledge the efforts of a team member or not, or whatever. As someone, or for example, I'm working for a client, like we do a really good job. They don't acknowledge us, or we give them all the credit, which we actually try to do. Like one of the things that I try to remember too is to measure myself by my level of integrity, the effort that I put in, like garner satisfaction from that at work, what we're creating together, versus the outcome or the expectation of someone's praise, right? Because I may or may not get it, and, some people, they might, at the end of the day, we're all just people, right? And I don't know whether it's someone who, they just got a divorce and they're like really, bad out of shape, and they're just not in the position that they can,
Yep.
Provide positive feedback, or somebody just died, or they're just an asshole, right? It could be a million different things, but out of my control. So
It's,
if
it,
I,
yeah. The
yeah,
thing is that don't expect the praise, right? I mean, it's
right.
because it's actually honestly nice when it's finally when you get it. And I can give you some examples. You know, I guess during my diving days, apparently I was a phenomenal diver. I didn't think much about it. And as I meet my older friends and my wife meets my older friends, and the first thing goes, Andrea, you have no idea. We used to go watch this guy when he practices because he's just awesome to watch him in the air doing all these dives.
Like we called this guy the dolphin,
Yeah, actually, that
No.
was no, that was my nickname, Dolphin. Oh my gosh! And I'm looking at these guys. This is this May, right? Last May, they had a dinner dance of our old high school. Because a lot of my high school guys are in California. So go on there. So one of these guys flew in from England, and first thing he gave me a big hug and started telling my wife how awesome I was during my diving career, and I had no idea that these guys actually took time to come and watch me practice. Right? So even though I might have not known, whatever it was that was going on in life, right? There were people who were just out there going, "Oh my God, what's this guy?" You know, and then you're finding out 45 years later, going, "Wow," and it brings you amazing joy. And I'm thinking, it's like, wow, like all the assumptions that you made that nobody cared. And good Lord, a lot of people cared. I didn't know about it.
That's super cool. And I agree. It is nice to hear.
Yeah.
So Duleep, we got a couple last questions for
Sure.
you, to round things out. One would be, on the healthcare radiology imaging front, acknowledging that you don't have a crystal ball. What do you think will be some of the biggest changes as time passes, and or, where do you see the industry going in the future?
So the industry is getting more and more sophisticated, right? The scanners that are coming out are giving amazing images that are helping not just the radiologists, but also, the referring doctors who are, wanting that study done on the patient. And I think while the hardware in the scanners are going way up and doing an amazing job, the application suites around it really, really, really needs to be either rewritten or forklifted or pretty much rewritten, because what we have today, in my opinion, is not going to enhance those things that is coming out to help, you know, a radiologist do his job faster, make a radiology group a little bit more efficient in terms of workflows, because all these applications are pretty much every single application out there today, 95% of them are legacy. They're bad code, bad database structures, right? So
Now, aren't a lot of those applications? I don't want to go down the rabbit hole right now. I'm
yeah,
like, oh shit. Aren't a lot of those applications proprietary to the hardware vendor themselves too,
no,
though?
but not really, right? Like if you're looking at the packs and if you're looking at the RIShes, right? Radiology information system, that really is your CRM to run your organization, right? From start to finish. Those things are written in a very archaic manner and in a very proprietary sense, that it's written to make money rather than to really help the industry, right? And it's not fluid, right? If you take an iPhone and or Android, people who are used to it know how to use it, no matter what kind of upgrade comes in there, like, and if they complain, the manufacturer, Apple or Google, will go fix it, right? In healthcare, I mean, you're getting, I mean, a lot of doctors are spending time in front of a computer when they should be spending time in front of a patient. Now, in radiology, they should be spending time in front of a computer, but there should be enough tools to give them more enhanced read, right? Which is happening. The modalities are getting better and better and better and better, but your PACS is the same old PACS that was from 5 years ago. So how is that interpreting those images properly is the question. And so this is where I think Dr. Simon is bringing AI and supplementing that with little AI viewers and everything like that. But again, from my view, that's all well and good. But if it's not baked into that workflow where it's seamless to the radiology, where it's a click of a button, he gets everything and then bang, off it goes, right? Um,
Yeah.
then,
So
then
basically what you're saying is that there's an opportunity for us to build a new risk that could disrupt the entire market.
absolutely, yeah, build a new
Oh
risk and
man.
packs, yeah, absolutely, especially on the risk side. Pack side, there are
Yeah.
a couple of vendors who have really stepped up and done a couple of things. They're expensive, but
Right.
it might be worth the expense, right? But at the end of the day, uh, uh, you know, you can easily ditch some of these applications. So I know some vendors are going the path of what SAP and Oracle did for CRMs, where here's your code base. We can help you rewrite it, modify it to where you want it, or you can have your own application developed. And I think there are a couple of vendors who are beginning to build research that way, so that you can, with a good set of programmers, have a good base, 80% of the code base, and then modify it to your way of doing business. That
Yeah.
might be a good way to go.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Great thought, to end things on. So anyway, Duleep, this has been awesome. Last question I just have for you that I got to ask is, if you could go back 5, 10, 15 years in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
One of the things I said, I wish I learned process of rational emotive behavior therapy when I was younger, right? It's great that I've learned it now, but I'm a slow learner. I was 52 when I learned it. I'm 66 now. And I wish I learned it at 25. And as I talk to these folks, they always say, when Eckhart Tolle would say, we should start teaching these things at kids when they're 2, 3 years old, because we'll make a better world, right? At the end of the day, the world will change. people will change in how we behave, how we look at life, how kind we are to people, right? In a way, all that eventually will change. But we are centuries and centuries of some kind of brainwash the way this is the way we should live, right? But and so we react based on our DNAs and how we got trained. And as I see my own change, because I was a firm believer that leopards don't change their spots. Nobody ever changes until it happened to me. So I was 52 when that happened. I wish I was 25 when that happened, because even then I would have made a much further impact on life and people around me and everything like that. So right now, I try to pay forward and catch up, and say, okay, how do I help younger folks think that way, right? And I think one of the best things that I remember, is when I was when going through this, I was in a class, and this class had, you name it, it was for domestic violence. So I was in that group, and I became their Zen master. So there were all these people in, they had, things on their legs so that, there was a monitor, right? And sometimes people didn't show up because they were already thrown back in jail, right? So I remember when I left, they all said, "Oh my God, who's gonna take our sessions?" And I felt really bad, but it was one of those things where my change had really like pushed, like what I call what I learned. I had started already giving what I learned to like 30, 40 people at a time, every week, right? So and I could see their change, and I don't know if they could sustain the help, they would definitely become better human beings, right? Because we were already there, because we were already in a bad situation, not good human beings. So as you get better, the best thing you can ever do is just to give it back. And so
I love that.
so if my younger self, I would have loved to have met me today.
That's super cool, Duleep. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for
And to our
having me.
listeners, thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you all next week.